Om Sahanavatu Sahano Bhunaktu Saha Viryam Karavavahai Tejasvinavaditam Astu Ma Vidvishavai. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. May that one protect us both. May that one nourish us both. May we work together with great energy. May our study be illumined. May we not unnecessarily disagree with each other. Peace, peace, peace beyond all. So this is a recorded version, since I'm away from the ashram at this point in time, of a continuation of some reflections on the Katha Upanishad. I call it reflections because a new section has begun where we use an analogy. The analogy serves to tell us that there is something like a tree, and every tree will have to have a root. What are we rooted in? All our difficulties and miseries come because we don't really trace our roots. There are a number of people who are keen to trace their genealogical roots. Take a family tree, and then, with the help of professionals, pick up some clues and find out where do I come from. Even some people doing a DNA test to see what is the component, racial component. Well, genealogy cannot trace it all the way. And there is a hierarchy that we can go through. And it becomes a very meditative process to trace our origins back to our roots. Rootedness implies a number of things. It implies being settled. It implies firmness. It implies faith, confidence. We know what we are rooted in, and the rest becomes self-explanatory. When we deal with our whole universe, whether it's our small universe of experience or the grander universe which is in front of us, when we wonder, as naturally science does, what is the origin of all this? Where did it come from? How do things arise? These are very profound questions. It begins with ourselves, because we are simply a sample of this entire universe. So all this universe that there is actually emerges and moves because there is this supreme entity which we can call Brahman, a selective term that implies something that is endless, has the capacity to expand, and yet itself is static. So all this universe that there is emerges and moves because of this supreme thing, not because of any independent entity. Now we can say that all the forces of nature are something like deities, powers. But these powers are regulated by a supreme presence. That presence we call Brahman. It is very natural to forget this and to create an individual sense of agency, which says, I am doing this, I am doing that. So if you personalize all these great forces, they may declare, I am greater, I am supreme, I am the one that blows, I am the one that burns. Even in the individual entity of the human body, you can say, I am the one that sees, I am the one that hears, I am the one that tastes, I am the one that achieves, I am the one that provides. And yet it's not true. When we go back to the root, we see all this agency goes away. All this prophet, agent status disappears, disintegrates. So yadidam kim cha jagat sarvam prana ejeti nisrutam mahadbhayam vajram. You see, vajram, all this universe that there is because there is the supreme Brahman, which is a great terror, there's a great fear that is associated with it. It's like one holding up the greatest weapon that we know of, the thunderbolt, the kind of image that says, if there is a supreme ruler of the universe, he just has to raise a thunderbolt and all the others will conform, will realize they have no other option. So it's like an uplifted thunderbolt. Those who know this become immortal. Why should they become immortal by virtue of this knowledge? It's because, as I say, the prophet-actor complex goes away. When you know the real entity, the real presence, like the sun shining. So prane, sati, the supreme Brahman, being there, then all this universe that there is, having emerged, moves, acts regularly. That Brahman, which is thus the cause of the origination, etc., of the world, is Mahat Bhayam, greatly terrifying. Like a servant who will act on the basis that the employer or the master is present. The term Bhayam is derived in the sense of that from which one gets fear. And like an upraised thunderbolt, Vajram Udyatam. The idea imparted, of course, is just as the servants finding their master in front with an uplifted thunderbolt methodically follow his command. In this same way, this universe consisting of the sun, the moon, the planets, and so on, and the constellations and the stars and the galaxies and the billions and billions of what we see now, they continue methodically with a great rhythm, without even a moment's respite, working continuously, moving continuously. Why should things move? It is because of this Brahman. This is a great subject for meditation. So when you know this, and with the prophet-actor complex gone, then the question of finitude and mortality and all the things that go with it, they all just suddenly disappear. On the basis that, and bring it down to the individual cell, I am that. So the text says how out of fear of him the world behaves. From fear of him fire burns, from fear shines the sun, from fear run Indra and air and death, which is the fifth, this term bayat, fear. So all things are shining, all things are moving because of its great presence. Then if one succeeds in realizing here this fact, before the body falls off, not in a post-mortem condition, not waiting, then one becomes freed. Or because of that failure, one becomes fit for embodiment in the worlds of creatures. You want to continue the prophet-actor complex, the idea of agency and individuality, continuously looking and seeking, trying to find, make some sense of the world through various adventures and misadventures, ups and downs, pains and sorrows, as well as pleasures. Then the universe will, or more accurately Brahman, will provide a suitable environment for it. Physical environment, geographical environment, and everything else. But if you are competent, if you know this fact of rootedness, the whole world, and that the whole world vibrates because it flows out from the divine life breath. Its power is as terrific as a thunderbolt. Those who know this, of course, become immortal. If one is unable to know him here before the death of the body, therefore, then we assume bodies again and again in the world of creation. If the world appears solid, like in a mirror, it appears to be solid, it indicates that the world, which is really the world of the intellect, the world of identification, the world of analysis, continuously trying to make sense of something, if it appears like real, like a dream appears real when you dream, it indicates the world of the forefathers, those people who went before you, those people who experienced near-death experience will see there was somebody guiding me by the hand. I recognize some people I knew, some faces I see. So if it appears shaky, like an image in water, then it indicates the world of higher beings. If it appears as distinct from the self as light from shade, then it will indicate this world of Brahman. So hence, effort is to be made for the realization of the self before the falling of the body. For here alone, it is possible, with all this equipment that we have, for the vision of the internal self to be as clear as that of a face in a mirror. Whereas this is not possible in other worlds. In other words, we don't see that apparent separateness and that reflection. You look into a mirror, it's quite clear. I'm the one looking, there's a reflection. But in other worlds, it's not so clear. A greater identification is there. Apart from the world of Brahma, we can go there, we can enjoy the company of the Lord of the universe, and from there glide across into the seamless unity. Now, how is this attained? How is this done? Since it's so necessary, can we be practical about it? What is the way? So the example again is given that as one sees in a mirror, so in one's intellect, as in a dream, so in the world of the mains, as it is seen in water, so in the world of the Gandharvas, as it is in the case of shade and light, so in the world of Brahma. So as one sees oneself very distinctly reflected, say in a mirror, similarly here, the Atman, that internal self, is in one's own intellect, is reflected in the intellect. So the idea is that when the intellect has become spotless, like a mirror, if a mirror is dirty and has stains on it, then you don't throw the mirror away necessarily, you clean it. And when you clean it, it reflects the real identity which is there, and the sense of separateness automatically comes about. There springs a distinct vision of the self when this happens. This is the commentary that is put out in these stanzas. Yatha swapni, as in a dream, the vision arising from the impressions of the waking state is indistinct. So similarly, indistinct is the vision of the self in the world of the mains. You see, there's an echo of our experience when we glide into a dream. And previously it was mentioned that that one remains while we dream. That one is there. When it is there, prana moves up, apana moves down. Supposing prana were to declare in the body the upward movement or the breath itself, I'm independent. What we call death is when I withdraw. This would be an essential mistake which leads to a further ignorance. And the result and the effect of the ignorance is to be born in a suitable world to try and continue to work this out. No, it is the presence of that self inside the body. Don't forget the analogy of the city that enables these to move. And when this departs, as it were, or more accurately, when the body's energy goes down, as it must, because it's an aggregate of forces, that self remains. It still remains in a dream. It still remains in a dream of sleep, but gets all mixed up. And in the same way, when we go to the world, other worlds, it is similar to the dream world. When we glide across the border and go into a dream state, it is equivalent to withdrawing from a waking world, which we consider to be real, and moving there where there are manufactured people and places and events, not necessarily in an orderly fashion. An echo of the waking state. So because of being entangled in the enjoyment of the results of work, yatha apsu, as in water, one's form is equivalent to, or appears to be without, any demarcation. You look in the water, it all seems, the image and the water seem to be the same thing. is very hazy, indistinct. The vision of the self in the world of the Gandharvas also, it is known from the authority of the scriptures that similar is the case in other worlds as well. Only in this one, which I mentioned before, this Brahma Loke, this world of Brahma, is the vision very distinct. This is being compared to being in a room and seeing on the one side the whole range of rooms on the one side and seeing that supreme source of light on the other, and naturally being attracted toward that, we glide across the border, as it were, and sit in the supreme unity of ourself called Brahman. So how is he to be known, and what is the need of his knowledge, is an interesting question. Because all this philosophy is fine, but can we know how to do this? How is he to be known? And also, why should we do it? What is the need? Can we conclusively answer this question? There are many people who embark, as it were, on spiritual life, but they don't really have the answers to these questions. The motivation goes away, boredom sets in, lack of interest. In other words, the world becomes more attractive. And because of that, they move away from their original search. Many people take up endeavors and don't follow it to their logical conclusions. So we need to know, what is the technique? How is he to be known? All these analogies put to the side. How is he to be known? And why should we do it? So the sixth stanza tells us beautifully, Indriyanam pruthak bhavam udayastamayo chayat. Pruthak ut padyamanmanam utva dhiro na shochati. Having known the dissimilarity of the senses that are arranged separately, the senses are arranged as a way, as an avenue of us getting some information from the outside world. But there are only 5 avenues. There may be more. For other creatures, there may be more, there may be less. But this is our only interpretation of the world in front of us. If we know that the senses are separate and dissimilar, and arise separately, and that there's a rising and setting of them, that is, once the waking state is finished, a rising of the senses takes place in dream. It sets, and a dreamless sleep takes place. When you know this, and you know there's a dissimilar entity that is watching all these events, like we can watch the sun rise, we can watch its transference across the sky, we can watch its demise in the evening, so as it were. That's our view of it, of course. I know I'm not the sun traveling. And so the senses arise. They come up and they also set, just like the sun rises and the sun sets. And somebody who really, really notices this, who's able to make this distinction, he cannot grieve, because grief comes from consciousness being allowed to flow out through the senses. And if by a systematic process, how is he to be known? If by a systematic process, scientific process, he is able to gather all that in and stand in a poised condition as a kind of observer witness in a blissful base, then all his grief will go, because the grief was to do with all the energy being directed outwardly through the senses. The grief in a dream goes because an identification is there also with that world of the senses. We only get peace when all of that settles down, but it's not the end of it. A fool that goes into a sleep wakes up as a fool. Nothing changed. So indriyanam of the senses, such as the ear, etc., that are separately produced from their sources. These senses are made from food, akasha, etc., for the purpose of perceiving their own respective objects, knowing through discrimination their difference, their nature of being essentially dissimilar to the nature of this self, that is extremely pure, absolute in consciousness alone. Similarly, knowing their rising and their setting, their creation and their dissolution, in relation to waking and sleeping, as belonging to them only and not to the self, Tiraha, the intelligent person, that is the person who keenly observes and experiences this, na shochati, does not grieve. For the constantly uniform nature of the self being unchangeable, the self cannot be the cause of sorrow. Similarly, there's another Vedic text that is quoted by the commentator. The knower of the self crosses over sorrow. This is a quotation from the Chandogya Upanishad. So this internal divine self, in relation to which the dissimilarity of the senses has been pointed out, is not to be realized. How do we realize it? It's not to be realized outside. We can't catch it on the outside, for it is the innermost self of all. How can that be? Because there is an order that we can distinguish, a kind of hierarchy of causes. The mind. The mind is superior to the organs. It's very clear. When we observe something on the outside, you can't take the mind out of the equation. It is the mind that sees. It operates as a kind of unity field, encompassing all the diversity of the experiences that are understood. And yet, the mind itself can be observed, its vagaries, its ups and downs. We can see what our emotions come up. We can see what our opinions are. We can see what our reactions are. And so the intellect is actually superior to the mind. But there's something even more superior to that. We can call this Mahat, a great, great soul, the great spirit. That is superior to the intellect, leading us to believe, along with the Purnananda Upanishad, that there is no separate thinker. That internal self is the thinker, the observer, the witness, all in one, the knower. When we ask this question about consciousness, what is consciousness? Naturally, people look to the outside. They don't follow this trail inwardly. So, thinking that consciousness is something to do with the outside, we have to look at the brain, because we can see a correlation. You do something with drugs to the brain, let's say anesthesia or something, and you'll see a registration of the outside world goes. You can tap into various areas of the brain and interfere with various emotions, functions like that. But the brain is an organic function. It has an organic function whereby what is behind it will flow. Something like a light bulb. It's not the light bulb that independently shines. It has to be hooked into a current. So what is the ultimate current? The unmanifested is superior to this Mahat, this cosmic mind. There is an entity which has an equilibrium in it. No disruption occurs. A potentiality there is there. It is equivalent to a dreamless sleep, a cosmic dreamless sleep, an ultimate dreamless sleep. So very cleverly, this stanza is leading us through a whole cycle that is put out in great depth in the Mandukya Upanishad, which is entirely to do with this subject. When the sense organs set and other senses rise and everything sets, what is that? And then it rises again and sets again, just like observing day and night continuously. So this unmanifest is there superior to the Mahat. The sense objects belonging to the same class as the senses, they're understood to be enumerated by the mention of the senses because the sense organs and the senses are of the same material. It's all an atomic structure. It's all organic molecules derived from food. Same thing. So all these sense organs and sense objects are actually the same thing. Why should we personalize it? The rest is the same. By the word sattva, the intellect is referred to here by the word sattva. So continuing from there, are we finished in our hierarchy? No. Superior to this unmanifest that is there before everything arises, this sense of creativity, we can compare it to a dreamless sleep. And if we can make this echo, then the dreamless area must be the highest point of potential creativity for us. That is why in the meditation process, we go into this pratyahara, this withdrawal of the mind from the outside to the inside, and make an art of being poised, standing there, waiting for creative moments to happen. Meditation does this consciously. It's a kind of planned dream. But in the dream and dreamless sleep phases, we have no control over it. These phases occur maybe 4 or 5 times a night from the waking world's standpoint. So superior to this unmanifest, that is, superior to even the ruler of the dreamless sleep, is this person, Purusha, who is pervasive. In case you think that this entity is as individual as the others, and therefore object, it is purely subjective, and for that reason, it can have no boundaries. So it is pervasive without worldly attributes, knowing whom a person becomes freed and attains immortality. We know that one. Avyaktat tu Puraha, the Purusha is superior to the unmanifest. And he is also pervasive. That has to be continuously pointed out in case we think it's something trapped inside, like a bird in a gilded cage. He is the source, even of all pervasive things. Space is pervasive. Space we find everywhere. But he is more pervasive than that. And the author of space, too. Alingaha, it's a curious term. Linga, of course, means a sign. How did it derive some other meaning? Supposing you have a small, let's say, 2 or 3 year, let's say a 2-year-old child, 2-year children, one is male, one is female, you put them in a bath, they splash around together. Then what is the sign that one is male and one is female? So, linga, there is one sign which will tell us. So, it means that sign through which anything is comprehended. That is the intellect, etc. The person, he who has not that linga, that sign that says something else, something else, something else, is indeed a linga without any clue, even though clues are there, not catching on to it, is devoid of all worldly attributes. Indeed, yam nyatva, having known whom, from the teacher and from the scriptures, jantuha, a person becomes freed. These subtle things require a teacher, a competent teacher, one who has realized all these things, or one who is at least a pure reflection of it. You can be freed even while living. Don't ask the question, when will I get salvation? In what condition? How many lives will I have to go? No. Don't you know you are already free? It is only that you feel bound. An elephant, when it's trained, they tie its leg to a tree or to a post. And when it tries to move, it gets restrained by the length of the chain. At some point, the chain gets removed, but the elephant still thinks it's there. So we think that we are bound. We can be free, or we can realize our freedom, even while living, from the bondages of the heart, such as ignorance, etc. These are defined in Patanjali Yoga Sutras as kleshas, starting off with the mother of all of them, ignorance itself. And from there, egoism. And there, the identification with the world that says, I have to survive at all costs. I have to move towards something which I find pleasant, away from something that is fearful or doubtful, something that drags me down, something that gives me pain, or I perceive it in this way. And so attachment to this world and ultimately clinging to life occurs. So when the body falls, he, gachati amrutatam ja, attains immortality as well. We have to live out what we call prarabdha karma. We have to spend our pocket money here and take the consequences of previous actions. But when all of that is done for the pure soul, the soul who realizes this, then immortality is there available. This part is to be construed with the earlier. So he, the alingaha, incomprehensible Purusha, by knowing whom a man becomes free and attains immortality, is superior to the unmanifested. Then the next question arises, how can there then be any possibility of the vision of the incomprehensible? If it's incomprehensible, is it an object? Can we grasp it? Can we see it? His form does not exist within the range of vision. That's the point. So we are saying that try to realize something, but you can't see it. So, na samdrashe tishtati rupam asya na chakukshit pashati kancha nenam hrida manisha manasa abhikla ruptoya te tad vidur amrutas te bhavanti. His form cannot be seen here. It's not within our range of vision. That would make it just an object, and the one who's seeing, therefore, is superior to it. Nobody sees him within the eye when this self is revealed. So when we say see God in all things, see the self in all things, religious equivalent God, can we do it? When this self is revealed through deliberation, it is realized by the intellect, the ruler of the mind that resides in the heart. Those who know this become immortal. The word chakshuha, in this sense, the eye, is used suggestively, of course, for all the senses. How then is he to be seen? When we say see God or see the self, how is he to be seen? He's seen by that which is in the heart, by the purified intellect, in other words. This has been said before, like looking into a mirror, cleaning the mirror, and then, aha, there it is. In that sense, a vision can be attained. And how can the ruler in the heart be attained? If it's in the heart, how can that be attained? For that purpose, yoga is being inculcated in this way. When the five senses of knowledge come to rest together with the mind, and the intellect too doesn't function, that state is the highest. When the five senses of knowledge come to rest together with the mind, is this something like a blank, something like a dreamless sleep? The intellect too is not working, it's not functioning. That state they call the highest. Then is dreamless sleep the highest? That question naturally will arise. No, they consider that keeping of the senses steady as yoga, even with the eyes open. One becomes vigilant at that time, not dead, not dull, not blanking the mind. Vigilance. For yoga is subject to growth and decay. Even though you say, oh, I've practiced for 1,000 years, or in this lifetime, 30 years, I practiced this discipline. I practiced tapasya and led a spiritual life. Now I can retire. There's no retirement for it. It's subject to growth and decay also, because it's a process. So, Brahman, if Brahman is an object, like anything else that we look for, of the activities of the intellect, etc., then it should be specifically apprehended. This is such and such. I've seen Brahman. This is it. This is it. It's definable. And since it cannot be perceived on the cessation of the intellect, when everything is finished, you can't perceive anything. There being no instrument to see it, then Brahman should surely have no existence, is a conclusion that can be put. Like a blank, like a dreamless sleep, like an unconscious coma. So therefore, some people have this conclusion. If that's the case, because you can't perceive it, it's indefinable, it's not reliant on the subject and the senses, it's not the object of scrutiny, and therefore maybe it doesn't exist at all. Despite the previous passages, that it is the source, everything else is dependent on it. It's a well-known fact in the world that a thing exists so long as it is within the range of our cognition or an instrument of cognition. And the contrary one is non-existent. So hence, says Shankaracharya, yoga is useless. That's our conclusion. We may as well resign ourselves to a blankness, an emptiness, shunya. Hence, yoga is useless, or Brahman is to be perceived as non-existing in as much as it cannot be recognized. This contingency having arisen, the reply comes in the 12th stanza. It cannot be attained through speech. A lot of people talk about this thing, but nobody experiences it, nor through mind, nor through the eye. How can it be known to anyone apart from him who speaks of it as existing, not as non-existing? Can't speak about something if it doesn't exist. So it's true that na eva vacha, neither through speech, nor manasa, nor through mind, na chakshuha, nor the eye or the senses of any kind, nor even through the other senses, other than the eye, praptum shapyaha, can it be attained. So that's the idea. Still, though it is devoid of all attributes, it does exist. Since it is known as the root of the universe, we have to bring it back to the analogy of the tree. For the denial of effects presupposes some existence as their ultimate limit. Similarly, this effect in the form of the universe, when traced back as an ascending order of subtleness, as we have seen, makes one apprised of the idea of existence as its ultimate resource. In meditation, that's what we do. Meditation, we're going back more and more to subtle, more causal areas until an aha moment comes, which is truly an expression of existence itself, a kind of blissful base. And even when the intellect is being attenuated through the sublation of objects, the intellect dissolves only as pregnant with the concept of existence. So, reason also is the proof for us ascertaining the real nature of the existent. If we are to argue, no, it is existent, not non-existent, just go through the logic of it, please. Don't make this assumption. And the non-existent, if the world has no root, this creation, just as the tree gets created from the root, would be filled with non-existence and would be perceived as non-existent. But actually, that's not so. You can't get something from nothing. This is an age-old question amongst debaters currently. Why is there something rather than nothing? Is another way of saying, why is there existence rather than non-existence? From nothing comes nothing. So it's perceived as existing, just like a pot exists, etc., produced from earth. These are perceived as permeated with earth, and therefore the self is not only the root of the universe to be realized as existing, but everything else is its expression. Asti iti bhavataha, apart from the faithful one, following the scriptures, speaks of existence. Brahman is to be known because Brahman, the root, is to be known, but not objectively, subjectively. The one who holds the theory of non-existence in the one who thinks perversely in this way, the root of the world, the self, does not exist. That doesn't make any sense. This effect is causeless, and it gets dissolved into non-existence as its end. So the idea is that it is not perceived in any way. But the self is first to be realized as existing, and then as it really is. This is the process. Don't forget, the original question is how. First of all, we understand what are the principles, a two-pronged approach. We understand from the Vedanta philosophy, going through all the logic, all the presentations, teachings of the teacher, the scripture, all of these things, recognizing the principle of it. Once we realize the fact of it, through repetition, through copious teachings, that goes against our natural gut instinct, that the world exists as a permanent reality when we really know it is not. Having really established ourselves in the principle, that's only step one, but it has no value unless the step two catches up to it, and we have to realize it as it actually is, as a reality, not as an abstract thing, not as a series of theories and principles. Very often in these talks, people tell us, all this philosophy and so on, so forth, all this intellectual stuff, I don't get it. Do you have something simple for us? Because people want an easy route. No, we don't. But we can put it extremely simply. The fact that you don't grasp it makes it complex. Because the fact of not grasping is this taking this flow of consciousness that is expressing itself through the sense organs and giving us pain from the objects. This has no solution to it if there's no realization of these principles. Then, having taught the principles, how do I practice? I have to understand it as itself. I have to understand it through love of God, or renouncing the fruits of my activities, or through deep meditation that's required for everyone, or through the path of discerning the real from the unreal, continuously seeing or feeling this flow of the self, moving as it were, flowing as it were, through all the external functions, that is, all the external adapters, or what you call limiting adjuncts parties. So it has to be understood in its real nature, that has to be known as merely existing, becomes favorably exposed or disposed for exposition, for self-revelation. Therefore, we should eschew, we should spit out devilish company of those advancing the theory of non-existence as their final conclusion. In other words, atheism in its various forms, not necessarily atheism as non-theism, but atheism that produces a materialism and says, there's nothing. Well, from nothing comes nothing. How will you explain this existent universe? And so today, it's a very, very relevant theme. It's estimated in many countries in Europe that children going through the educational system, even if they have a foundation in religion, and religion is the cause of their skepticism very often, will come to a teenage conclusion, maybe 15, 16 years of age, that there is a non-existence because we believe in science, as if science is something opposed and different to logic and to mystic experience and to this philosophy. You didn't delve into that side of things. You took things in a superficial way, taking the childhood stories into adulthood. And the transition period between childhood and adulthood is teenagehood. And being persuaded by peers and others, no, we can't have this God sitting in heaven, this kind of funny caricature. And those supposedly intellectual, scientific minded people will propose this. They'll paint a caricature of an unsuspecting divine entity sitting in the clouds somewhere. Then naturally we won't believe in that. Well, naturally you won't believe in it. But is there something deeper? Is there a root cause? And how do we solve this problem or this question? How do we get existence from non-existence if you're proposing that? So asti iti eva upalap davyaha, the self should be realized as existing, that is immanent in all. And this requires a little imagination. We use the creative capacity that we have to construct God and all his angels sitting in the hearts of all. This is productive of effects in which existence inheres and is having the intellect, etc., as its limiting adjuncts. But then when the self is devoid of all that and is not subject to changes, and effects do not exist apart from their cause, because of the Vedic texts, all transformation has speech as its basis. And it is name only. Earth as such is reality. I'm reading the commentary here. Then of that unconditioned attributeless self that is free from becoming an object of such concepts as existence and non-existence. We can't discuss this. We can't say is it existent or non-existent. The term is irrelevant. It transcends all of that. It's indescribable. But we know it's a basis. We can describe it as blissful base. We can describe it as Atman, real self, divine self, authentic self. It is revealed, tattva bhavena, in that truly is revealed the form too. It is the self to be realized. It is to be realized, not to be theorized, but to be realized. It is in this realization that if we are to weigh various values, such as love or knowledge, such as intellectual pursuits versus love, love should win. It is the heart of something. It is really that truth is found in this. Genuineness is found in tears. And it is this genuineness that takes us away from the abstract and puts us into actual touch with what is there. When all desires clinging to one's heart fall away because they are completely eclipsed by the joy of this blissful base, then a mortal becomes immortal and he attains Brahman. When? Here, now. So we'll leave that off now. When again will be the desires be totally uprooted is a follow-up question to this, because we'll be anxious to know that. And the answer will come when all the knots of the heart are destroyed, even while a man is alive. Then a mortal becomes immortal. This much alone is instruction from the Upanishads. Now this question then of reincarnation that has been discussed previously, this concept of where are we going, what is the aim of life, etc., all disappears in this one statement. Itavati, this much only is there should not be any anticipation that there is any more than this. Anushasanam, the instruction, the expression of all the Upanishads should be supplied to complete this sentence. By asserting he attained Brahman here, it's been declared that there is no going for an enlightened man of whom all the knots of ignorance become destroyed on the realization of the identity of the self. No coming, no going. Because the self is an all-pervading and absolute attributeless Brahman. And who becomes Brahman even while living, so to speak. You can't become something you already are, which fact is also supported by other Vedic texts such as, of him the organs do not depart. Being but Brahman, he is merged in Brahman, says the Purnananda Upanishad. But for those who are not much advanced in this knowledge of Brahman, who are engaged in all kinds of other knowledge, worship, meditation, that route, and who are fit for the world of Brahma, that's another route. So a generosity of expressions and methods are put forward, falling into basically two categories. Follow the route of, commonly, the route of devotion, worship, as clinging on, as it were, or retaining, I should say, more accurately, a sense of individuality with an urge to realize it within. Not there yet, that's okay, but at some point in time, there'll be enough purity in the mind to realize this, and then I can go and meet the object of my worship in Brahmaloka. That's one route. The other route is realize this here and now, and that possibility is there. The 16th stanza is what we will be discussing next week, next time. And so that will be more of a live recording. So please enjoy the rest of your weekend. Om Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. Peace, peace, peace be unto